Every weekend, we found ourselves repeating the same routine without thinking much about it. We left home feeling excited, then came back carrying more shopping bags than a sense of fulfillment. At first, it all felt completely normal. A cup of coffee, lunch out, a small snack for Mira, and somehow it always ended with, we might as well get this too. Monday morning always seemed to feel the same. My wallet felt lighter, while the memories from the weekend quietly began to fade. I quietly started asking myself a question. Were we really buying happiness? Or were we simply buying a habit? My name is Clara. One day, we decided to try something that had always felt impossible for our family, spending 48 full hours without spending a single dollar. Friday evenings usually marked the beginning of our small weekend plans. Armand wondered where we should eat, while Mira happily talked about the place she wanted to visit. I picked up my phone to check the weekend promotions. Restaurant deals, play tickets, and shopping offers kept filling the screen one after another. Without thinking much, I started adding up what the day might cost. Parking, meals, drinks, snacks, and maybe one small gift for Mira quietly found a place in my mind. None of those choices felt especially expensive on their own, yet together they almost always became more than we realized by the end of the weekend. While looking through our monthly spending notes, I noticed the same pattern again. The expenses we never planned kept appearing on Saturdays and Sundays. I looked at the kitchen pantry and realized it was already well stocked. In the living room, our board games had been sitting untouched for a long time. For the first time, a quiet question stayed with me. If everything we needed was already at home, why did going out always seem like the only way to enjoy the weekend? That evening, I opened our spending records from the past several weekends. I wasn't trying to find someone to blame, I only wanted to see where our money had really been going. None of the purchases looked excessive on their own. Each one seemed perfectly reasonable when I looked at it by itself. A coffee during our walk, ice cream for Mira, parking, an afternoon snack, and dinner because we were too tired to cook. Looking back, each stop felt completely ordinary. They all felt like small rewards after a long week of work. But together, they quietly took a much bigger share of our family budget than I had realized. I began to notice that we had never really planned our weekends. We simply slipped into the same routine every single week. The more I thought about it, the stranger it felt. We always came home with extra things, but not always with memories we truly wanted to keep. One question stayed with me after that. Were we really paying for experiences, or simply filling our weekends in the easiest way we knew? The next morning, I shared one simple idea with Armand. What if we spent this entire weekend without spending any money at all? Armand looked at me with a quiet smile. 48 hours? No coffee, no restaurants, and no shopping? I laughed and nodded. If it turns out to be boring, at least we'll have tried something different. We started looking at everything we already had at home. The pantry was full enough, old games were still neatly stored, and the backyard felt bigger than we had remembered. Myra overheard our conversation and looked up with simple curiosity. Does that mean we're having our vacation at home? I hugged her and smiled. Yes, let's see if our home can become a place for adventure too. As I prepared for the weekend, something inside me began to feel different. Maybe these 2 days were not about saving money, but about finding the happiness that had been hidden beneath the habit of buying. Saturday morning arrived feeling almost the same as every other weekend. The sun was bright, but this time we had promised ourselves we wouldn't leave the house just to spend money. My phone buzzed several times throughout the morning. Coffee deals, restaurant discounts, and shopping offers seemed to arrive right on cue to test our decision. I cleared every notification without letting myself read any further. The strongest temptation wasn't about needing something, but about following a familiar routine. Instead, I invited Mira to open the kitchen cabinet with me. We found flour, eggs, cocoa powder, and ingredients that had been waiting there for quite a while. Before long, our kitchen felt more like a playroom than a place to cook. Mira's hands were covered in batter, Armand followed the recipe, and I laughed at our first cake that looked far from perfect. After lunch, we took a slow walk around our neighborhood. Without rushing toward a shopping center, we started noticing the small flowers, the trees, and the wide sky we usually passed by. The days seemed to move at a gentler pace than usual. Strangely, I didn't feel as though anything was missing, even though we hadn't spent a single rupiah. By late afternoon, we spread a picnic mat across the backyard. All we brought was homemade cake and warm tea from the kitchen. Armand pulled out an old board game that had been sitting forgotten in the closet. The box looked worn, but every piece was still there. We played together, teasing each other and laughing between every turn. Mira cheered every time she won, filling the house with happy energy. As the sun was setting, Mira leaned against my shoulder with a wide smile. "Mom, this is the most fun weekend." I looked at her face for a few quiet seconds without saying anything. We had not gone to the mall, bought toys, or eaten out that day. That was the moment I realized something I had been missing for a long time. I had spent so much time looking for places that might make us happy, even though happiness had been sitting with us in our own backyard. I smiled as I held Mira's hand and reached for Armand's at the same time. Maybe our best memories had never come from what we bought, but from the time we truly shared with one another. That night, after Mira had fallen asleep, I sat alone in the living room. I quietly replayed every moment we had shared over the past 2 days. We had not gone anywhere that weekend. Even so, the house had felt more filled with laughter than many weekends before. I found myself comparing this weekend with the ones we usually had. Most weekends ended with shopping bags and a kind of tiredness I could never quite explain. This weekend had felt different. There was nothing new to bring home because we had never really gone far from home in the first place. That was when something simple became clear to me. For a long time, I had assumed togetherness needed something we could buy. What my family had been missing was not a new place or an expensive activity. They simply needed the version of me that was truly present, instead of thinking about the next expense. I smiled quietly to myself. It turned out the weekend had not changed at all, only the way we looked at happiness had. Before bed, Armand sat beside me on the front porch. The night felt quiet after a simple day that somehow felt full. "I thought Mira would get bored," I said as I looked across the darkening yard. Instead, she hardly touched her phone today. Armand smiled to himself. Maybe she wasn't looking for somewhere new. Maybe she was looking for our time. I nodded without saying much. That simple thought seemed to answer many of the questions that had been sitting in my mind. "I'm only realizing it now," I said quietly. "Every time I wanted our weekends to feel special, I assumed we needed to spend money." Armand gently held my hand. What made today feel different wasn't saving money. It was making something together. That night, we agreed to carry a different way of thinking into our family life. We called it the creative leisure. Mindset finding happiness by creating together instead of looking for it through consumption. Monday arrived like any other. We went back to work, Mira returned to school, and our family settled into its usual routine. One small thing felt different this time. Looking at our bank balance no longer brought the quiet guilt that usually followed the weekend. I began planning our weekends in a different way. Instead of asking where we should go, I started wondering what we wanted to create together that week. Some weekends, we made pizza with ingredients already waiting in the kitchen. Other times, we rode our bikes, read together, or simply enjoyed the afternoon sun in the yard. Not every weekend became completely free of spending. We still enjoyed eating out or visiting favorite places sometimes, but those moments became intentional choices instead of automatic habits. I slowly realized the biggest change was not in our bank account. It was in the way we valued the time we shared as a family. Before long, we were bringing home fewer things than before. Somehow, we returned with many more stories that stayed with us long after the weekend ended. I now believe that family happiness does not always wait in expensive places. Sometimes it is already sitting around our dining table, in the backyard, or inside the quiet laughter we almost missed while looking for entertainment somewhere else. I learned that saving money does not mean giving up happiness. Once we stopped buying more, we simply spent more time enjoying what was already part of our everyday life. That no-spend weekend did not turn us into a perfect family. It simply reminded us that being present with one another was worth more than anything we could have spent. If this small story from our family stayed with you today, you may also enjoy spending time with the other stories in Clara's family journal. Together, we keep learning through simple family habits that bring us a little closer every day. Now, I'd love to hear your idea. If you could not spend any money this weekend, what is one fun activity you would choose with your family?